Melanie Marin, Hunter Mill District School Board member. Welcome, Melanie. Thank you very much for being here. Also, we will, so there's a message about privacy. This is being recorded, so hopefully that's okay with everybody. This is a town hall format electronically, so we'll do our best to make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask their question or make their comment as they would like. So before we get into that portion of the town hall, Melanie, would you like to say something in the welcoming time now?
Sure. Hi, good evening. Thank you, Supervisor, and to the Fairfax County staff for offering the second town hall. The first one was in person and now flexible and virtual. So I'll look forward to sharing some updates about the Fairfax County Schools budget a little later. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. So tonight, Phil, I guess, are you on point for our Department of Management and Budget tonight?
I am.
All right, and Phil has the slides. So, so go ahead and take it away. And again, we'll have a presentation with some background on the budget process, some highlights. And then Melanie, I believe, has a few slides, and then we're going to jump right into Q&A after that. Go right ahead.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I am Phil Hagan. I am the director of the county's Office of Management and Budget. I hope everybody can see my slide deck okay and hear me all right. Excellent. Got 2 thumbs up there. So what I'm going to be going through tonight is a shorter version of the county executive's presentation that he delivered to the board on February 20th. Since this is going to be a high-level overview tonight, I would encourage anyone who's looking for more detail on our budget to visit our website at fairfaxcounty.gov/budget. And then one resource that I always like to point people to that's there on our website is our advertised budget summary, which really goes line by line. Everything that we've included as an adjustment to the budget is detailed there. All of the general fund adjustments. Really a great resource. There we go. So like our budget last year, our focus this year is on supporting and stabilizing our employees as well as our core services. A significant portion of the overall budget increase is directed to the Fairfax County Public Schools. We've also included funding for pay increases and benefit costs for county employees. Some of the other county adjustments included are for required debt service payments, as well as our commitments to fund Metro and Connector. So just those first 4 major items, schools, employee pay and benefits, debt service, and then transportation. Those added up to more than what our revenue increase at the current real estate tax rate will support. And so that is why the advertised budget proposed a 4-cent increase on the real estate tax rate, just to really cover the cost of those. The Board of Supervisors back on, I'm losing track of time, March 5th, I believe it was, voted on the tax rate that they would advertise. They did vote to advertise the 4-cent tax rate increase that was included in the budget. It's important whenever we talk about what the board authorizes advertisement of. The advertised tax rate is the maximum tax rate that they can adopt without first re-advertising a different rate. They can always adopt something lower than what they advertised, but they cannot go above what they advertised. So then after those kind of first 4 major categories, all of our other county increases that we've included are completely offset by over $36 million in savings as well as reductions that we identified through a month-long process leading up to the development of this budget, as well as about $3 million in targeted fee adjustments, as well as indirect cost chargebacks. That reduction exercise, it also identified 84 positions that can be eliminated. We have 42 new positions included in the budget, and so overall, we have a net decrease of 42. Just another way to talk about it, for every 1 position we've recommended to add, we've identified 2 for elimination. So this slide provides a history of our annual changes in general fund revenue. Our FY 2025 revenue forecast includes an estimate of 6% growth over the current FY 24 estimate. I'd note that that includes that 4-cent increase in the real estate tax rate. Our revenue growth rate without that increase at the current real estate tax rate would be 3.5%. So then looking at some of our major general fund revenue categories, we primarily rely on the real estate tax to fund county needs. It's about 66% of our overall general fund revenue. That category is projected to increase 6.8% over last year based on rising home values as well as the increase in the tax rate. Personal property taxes are listed there next. They're projected to increase 8.8%. They decreased 2.3% last year. The FY25 projection does assume that we'll have an assessment ratio of 100% for personal property taxes. And then the last category I want to jump to on the slide is the bottom one, investment interest. That one increased significantly in 23 as well as in 24, really because the Federal Reserve, they were raising interest rates to deal with inflation. And so we saw some much better returns on our cash portfolio. The Fed is expected to make some rate cuts during this calendar year. And so we're expecting to see a slight decrease in our FY25 revenue as those interest rates start to fall. We are trying to lock in those rates for longer periods to make sure that we can keep up with some of these earnings for a while. So now digging into the real estate tax and the real estate tax base, we break it down into two major components: equalization, which is market appreciation. That would be you owned your house last year, you haven't done anything to your house, what would it sell for this year? And then the other component is growth, and that really is any kind of construction. That could be a brand new skyscraper, or it could be just adding a deck onto the back of a house. And so residential assessments overall increased about 2.86%. When we look at the residential market during 2023, the average sales price of homes, they were up 3.8%. Primarily, that was low inventory. Even with that low inventory, homes were still selling pretty quickly, averaging just 18 days on the market. Volume was down, though, and high mortgage rates really made the houses less affordable. Commercial real estate, on the other hand, decreased by 1.25%. There was a pretty big spread there in performance between the different categories. The big winner was hotels. They were up 22%. Really, we're seeing them returning back to their pre-pandemic norm. Meanwhile, office elevators, those are about a quarter of our non-residential base. They were down 9%. And so that's the fourth straight year of decreases that we have in that category. I think there we're really seeing some of the same trends that we have, like teleworking, that have been impacting office values for a few years. So now this next slide provides a summary of the overall budget proposal. This is really where all the numbers are. All the dollars shown here are changes over the prior year's adopted budget. And so revenues in the top half of the chart, our total projected increase in available funding is just over $363 million. That amount, it does include the impact of the proposed real estate tax rate increase, also a proposed increase in the cigarette tax from 30 cents up to the maximum rate of 40 cents per pack. It also includes several of those adjustments I mentioned resulting from our efforts to identify additional resources, either through fee adjustments or through indirect cost chargebacks. And then the lower half of the chart lists how we've utilized those projected revenue increases. Approximately $174 million is allocated to schools, most of that for support of the school operating fund. And then county increases total about $178 million. $148 million of that is for employee pay and benefits. Then debt service and transportation, they're about $12 million each. And then that last category, other priorities, that includes the net impact of all other adjustments, and they're offset by reductions in general fund supported agencies. So after all of those recommended adjustments, there's a balance of $3.83 million left in the budget. So now taking a different look at the budget and new spending, this is really all that new spending in pie chart form. This is just new spending, so it excludes the balance that's set aside for the board's consideration. It also excludes any revenue adjustments. But you can see in the pie chart, about 49% of new spending in the proposal is allocated to schools. Another 42% is for county pay and benefits. Then transportation, which is Metro, as well as the Fairfax Connector bus system, they account for 4% of new spending. And then 3% is for debt service. And so then all other adjustments are that other priorities point, the 2%. They're broken out in that chart on the right, along with that nearly $34 million in offsetting expenditure reductions. Hopefully you can see some of the categories there. I know they're small, but they're things like parks, safety and security, human services. So the next few slides that I go through, they're going to go into each of these areas in more detail. The slides, they're going to have highlights of some of the adjustments that are included in the budget in each of these areas. Again, I'd point you to the advertised budget summary where we have that exhaustive list of all the adjustments as well as the reductions that are proposed. So our largest net increase in the budget is support for our Fairfax County Public Schools. I'm not going to go into too much detail here since I know that we're going to have a separate presentation specifically into the school's budget. The schools did request a operating transfer request, though, of $254 million, or about 10.5%. Based on the significant budget pressures that we're facing this year, we weren't able to include full funding of that request. And so the advertised budget does include an operating transfer increase of $165 million. That's a 6.8% increase. But then that delta between the 165 and the 254 that was requested is $89 million. And so we have left that amount unfunded at this point. So then moving on, the biggest driver on the county side of the increase is employee compensation. Proposed pay and benefits increase a total of $148 million. That does include funding to support the collective bargaining agreements that we have with the unions that represent our uniformed police officers, firefighters, and E911 call takers. Really those agreements, what we see there are some revisions to the pay scales within the fire and E911 call takers, really looking to increase the starting pay there. And then as well with police officers, some changes there in order to make sure that they're keeping up and are competitive with others in the area. The budget also includes performance and longevity increases for our general county employees, as well as merits and longevities for our non-represented uniform public safety. The budget also includes funding for a 2% market rate adjustment. The calculation for our market rate adjustment was 4.1%. Again, based on some of the budget pressures here, what was included in the advertised budget was 2%. And then that last bullet, the budget also does include increases to support employee benefits. The main driver there are required increases in our employer contribution rates for our 3 counties defined benefit retirement plans. All 3 plans, they fell short of their investment targets. For debt service, we're proposing an increase of $20.5 million to support the combination of county and schools debt service. That does include the debt payments on the $350 million of general obligation bonds that we just sold in January. This is our second year at that $350 million bond sale level. The Board of Supervisors, as well as the school board, they had a joint CIP committee that the results of that committee were to recommend to increase our annual bond sales from what was a limit of $300 million per year up to $400 million per year. And so we've been working gradually up to that. We will increase up to that full $400 million as our January 2025 bond sale. And really what that additional capacity is going to get us is really making better progress on some of our capital renewal where we have police and fire stations, park rec centers, schools that are needing to be renovated. We'll hopefully be able to make some more progress on them, especially with some of the cost increases that we've seen, just the cost of construction going up with inflation. Then the table at the bottom of the slide shows our bond referendum plan. We alternate between county and schools referendums each year. This fall, we'll have a referendum for county bond sales. What we'll have on that referendum will be public safety as well as metro bonds. So transportation, there's been a lot of uncertainty this year with both Metro and our Fairfax Connector bus system. So you might have seen in the news back in the fall that Metro announced a budget shortfall of $750 million. And then there's been a lot of discussion about how to close that gap. When we were building this budget, there were more unknowns regarding Metro than there are now. What we included was a net increase of almost $37 million in county support for Metro. 10 million of that would come from the general fund, while the remainder comes from state aid as well as gas tax revenues. Based on where the state budget is, what we're hoping is that the state will be providing an additional $65 million to support Metro. If that actually passes and goes through, then what that should translate for us is that we'll be able to bring down this contribution somewhat, allow us to really reduce the overall amount of general fund support dedicated to Metro. Meanwhile, on Connector, when we were putting this budget together, our contracted operator for the Connector bus system, which is Transdev, they were in the middle of negotiations with the union that represents their bus drivers. What we had included in the budget was a modest operating increase of just over $2 million. With the agreement in place between Transdev and the union, we're expecting additional costs here. We think really what's going to happen as we look at this overall transportation program area is that those savings that we're going to see on the Metro side, we'll be able to shift them to cover that delta on the Fairfax Connector side, and overall see a pretty similar investment here as far as general funds to the transportation program area. So then turning to our reduction exercise. So based on the financial outlook as we were looking ahead to FY 2025 last year, we knew that it was going to be a difficult budget year. And so we directed agencies to come up with reduction options that would total 7% of their general fund budgets, really looking for ways that we could offset other increases in this budget. So the reductions that we've decided to move forward with and that we've recommended, they focus on options that we don't think will have a considerable impact on agency operations and also won't have an impact on existing employees. They primarily focus on efficiencies as well as shifting some cost to non-general fund sources. But in total, we've identified $36 million in net savings, and that includes, again, those 84 positions that can be eliminated. A small portion of that $36 million is increased revenue. We've proposed to add some resources to the Department of Tax Administration that we think is going to help with business tax compliance and therefore increase revenues there. We also conducted a comprehensive review of user fees and to see where we could make adjustments there. Among those, there are some increases that we've proposed to zoning fees as well as fire marshal fees. I know the board is taking a look at those, and so we might see some adjustments to what we've recommended, maybe a phase-in of some of those fee increases. We also reviewed our indirect cost chargebacks to other funds. That's resulting in a net increase of nearly $500,000 in the transfers into the general fund. Those charges, what they're intended to do is to reimburse the general fund for the support that general fund agencies like finance, human resources, procurement, that they provide to some of those other funds that have their own funding sources. So then the savings and the fees that are noted on this slide, they fully offset the adjustments that I'm going to note on the next couple of slides. And so these next couple of slides are digging into that other priorities category. So first off, $16 million is included for the impact of contract rate increases. Those are particularly in our health and human services agencies where we partner with nonprofits. And those nonprofits, they're facing inflationary increases as well as compensation pressure, really some of the same recruitment retention issues that we've seen, that employers nationwide have seen. That amount, the $16 million, also includes some other expenses such as fuel, waste disposal, IT, maintenance, software, some of those things where we're seeing cost increases. Housing and human services, some of the investments that we're making there, we have some positions to support our affordable housing program. We've included baseline funding for our hypothermia program. Also, we've redirected some of the savings from that reduction exercise in order to preserve 72 early childhood slots. Those were originally funded through a federal earmark, and so this gives them recurring funding to support those slots. Then we have almost $7 million for environmental and energy initiatives, as well as some other support for parks. Some of those for parks, there's baseline support for their bamboo mitigation efforts, as well as forestry operations. We're also starting what we expect is going to be a multi-year effort in parks to work towards our zero waste goals. Really what we'll see there is right now you go out to a park and there's a trash bin. You'll start seeing that there'll be a recycling bin next to the trash bin, and we'll have the staff to pick those up and dispose of those two waste streams appropriately. We also have funding for just general parks maintenance. And then finally, we're also including $3.4 million for Nova Parks. We had previously supported their capital program through our bond program. By getting this into our baseline budget instead, it's going to free up some bond capacity again for some of those capital projects where we really need the bond capacity on the county side as we're seeing cost increases. So then continuing, we have just under $6 million included for IT support, really looking to modernize our IT systems and stabilize our network. And then we have some other adjustments included here to support new facilities as well as address some workload issues. That includes additional support in Office of Elections. What we're seeing there is really needing some additional support as we are responding to some of the changing state requirements, particularly relating to like absentee voting and things like that. We also have some new probation counselor positions in the General District Court. Those are going to help with people who are being diverted from incarceration into mental health treatment. And we also have 4 civilian support positions for the Lorton Police Station. Those are the frontline police civilian aides that sit at that front counter and really help people who are coming into the station. So then I just have a few more slides to wrap up. So first, looking forward, kind of where we are now. Again, the board a few weeks ago adopted that maximum real estate tax rate for advertisement, which is the 4-cent increase that the budget is based on. From now, what we'll be doing is we're continuing to monitor revenues. We're continuing to look at what's happening with the state budget. We will come out with our add-on package, which is like an update to the budget that we deliver to the board during the public hearings in April. We have a number of ways this year to provide input on the budget, more than we've had before. We're using a new platform where, as before, you can still submit any comments that you have online. We also now have options where, if you'd like, you can text, email, or call in and leave a voicemail with feedback on the budget. There's also the budget public hearings. Those are a great way to come in and testify before the Board of Supervisors. Those are going to be April 16th, 17th, and 18th this year. And then, of course, another way to provide input is attend a budget town hall, which you're all doing tonight. And my last slide here is our budget timeline. Where we are right now, really the next point in our timeline is April 16th to 18th. Again, the public hearings on the budget. From there, the board will start working towards adoption of the budget. April 30th is when they mark up or decide on what changes are going to go into the budget. We always say that's when really the real work of putting together the board's budget happens. Meanwhile, May 7th is the official adoption of the budget. And then the school board will work on their side, and July 1st is when our fiscal year begins. So that is it for me.
All right, Phil, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Appreciate you walking through those slides. And if folks have comments or questions and want to go back to any of those slides, Phil, you can bring it up later, right? Okay,
right.
Fantastic. Very good. Okay, Melanie, I think you may have some slides as well. So
Yes,
we didn't
I
rehearse
do.
this, so not sure if they're ready to go or somebody else has them.
I believe they are in your team's lineup there. Is that correct?
Let's see. I don't see him yet, but let's see.
One second. Yeah, pull them
All
up.
right, here we go. Good
Great.
job. Thank you, Paul. And
Thank you very much.
so, Melanie, I'll turn it over to you, and hopefully the slides will be coming up here in just a sec.
That sounds great. So good evening, everyone, constituents. I am your Hunter Mill representative on the Fairfax County School Board. So whether you have students in schools or not, or whether you are an employee of FCPS or have family who are employees or not, these are your public schools and I represent you. Most of county residents do not have students in our schools. So our public schools really are our community good. So, and also if you do have students in our schools, whether your student attends a school that's physically in Hunter Mill District, which is generally the Reston Pyramid of South Lakes and the Madison Pyramid, a little bit of Herndon, a little bit of Westfield. But let's say your child goes to TJ High School, which is across the county, I still represent your family. So the representation goes from where you live. So I want to begin, if you could please advance the next slide, thank you, with just an overview of the revenue. And what you'll see on the next page is, if you could advance that, please. Is that Paul?
Sorry, one
Thank
second.
you
Having
so
a
much.
technical piece. Sorry.
I appreciate it.
Actually,
Thank you.
I advanced it, so
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, did it show up? I don't see just yet. With the, I don't see it showing up. with the pie chart. So it would be slide 2. Oh, does it say take control? Oh, I can take control. Okay.
There we go.
I
Okay,
will
yeah,
take
I had
control.
control of
Okay.
mine, but not yours.
All right, it's nice to be in control. Okay, so this is the projected revenue as was spoken to. And if you look at the first line in that chart there, or the first gray line, the state revenue is $42 million. The federal revenue is a very paltry $2 million. And it's common for the federal government to fund only 7% of any public education's budget. Very, very small. We had a beginning balance from savings and other revenue, but you'll see that the far majority is from our local county revenue, the $254 million. So you'll hear the supervisors talking about transferring money over to the school division. That's what that means. The school board does not collect revenue. We are not the purse string holders. The county board of supervisor does that. You could see that further broken out in that pie chart. Now, what I want to do is call your attention to something pretty monumental that happened this fall. A year ago, the General Assembly asked their Joint Legislative Review Committee, the JLARC committee, to investigate how school funding is done in Virginia. And it was a shock to none of us working in education, but it did clearly state that Virginia has been chronically underfunding its public schools for decades. So you can see here in this chart that states like West Virginia, Maryland, Kentucky, those state governments fund their local school divisions higher than Virginia does. So you can see that we're lagging not even the national average. Further, what the study showed is that if we were just funded or had the investment made of our school division at the national level, it would equate to $1,900 more per student, meaning that Fairfax County is pretty much owed at least $345 million if it was just the national average of what a state funds localities for this year only. So multiplied by decades, it's a very stark set of findings. Now, the General Assembly, unfortunately, did not seem to make much progress in undoing the formulas that undergird all of this. It's going to take some serious work. And but this is a huge piece of information, and it shows that even though, of course, we could always be more efficient and try to make the best investments, we are just starting at a much lower level than the states around us and the states nationwide. It's very, very disheartening. So back to our budget. So I want to tell you about this budget because what our superintendent has done is prioritize recruitment and retention of our staff, because it's the people that make education work, not only our teachers and those that work in instruction, but all the operations people, our bus drivers, food nutrition service workers, our custodians, our grounds people. It's a huge, huge employer. We are the third largest employer in Virginia. So what this does is it asks the county, as was said by our Fairfax budget staff, it does ask the Board of Supervisors for more money. Now, the tail of the budget is, it's always two things. One is that the Board of Supervisors have been incredible partners, and they have funded our school system time and again over the decade that I've personally been involved with advocating. But it's also true that the costs of education and the needs our students have gone up. So traditionally, the board is funded at 52.6% of the budget, and this transfer amount so far is just shy of that. So if you look at our demographics, what's really also important to understand that Fairfax County is quite different from years ago. So right now, we're actually continue to increase our student population from the pre-COVID time. We're up to 182,000. But as that student population enrollment increases, the number of students in need is increasing exponentially. So FRM, that's the Federal Free and Reduced Meals Program, which is a proxy for students, level of poverty. And we're seeing it go up 20% of the new students incoming have socioeconomic challenges. Our ESOL, what we're now calling our multilingual learners who are needing that additional support to learn English. And then our special education population also is up. But there's a good point with the special education population I just want to highlight. Years ago, students who had dyslexia, which is a 20% of our American population has, they might not have been identified, and they probably didn't reach their full potential, and maybe they got some not great places that the rest of society had to help with. But now, because we can identify children's needs so much earlier and better, we can help those students to really graduate with their success, ahead. It just does take more resources. So I also want to talk about our teacher scale. This is a very complicated one. I didn't know that this one was in there. So all this to say, if you just look at the left side of the school division, you can see that we are actually not only near the end of the list in our DC area school divisions, but we are below the market average when it comes to that minimum, middle career, and maximum career. It's expensive here. We all know that. And as a homeowner, and I'm sure there are many homeowners on the call today, we know that we as Fairfax homeowners get the brunt of the taxes. And this again gets back to that state problem that we don't have enough differentiation in our revenue to help ease that on our homeowners. But this is so important. We know education is a tough field right now. Our kids have more needs. People are not graduating from colleges to go into education. It's a dire situation. So the superintendent has prioritized the funding for teacher salaries with no new programs. There's nothing new coming down the pike. It's all about retention and recruitment. So you can see here on this final slide that, again, the compensation is the big piece. Required adjustments, health insurance goes up. We have commitments with retirement that goes up. Contractual services for all sorts of things that the board reviews before we're voted on. And then we've got some multi-year investments you can see very small that we're going to maintain, including our joint environmental work with the county. So our budget calendar follows the Board of Supervisors. They are the leader in this process. And we also have a public budget hearing. And I'm happy to receive your questions throughout this process. And I'm happy to take questions as well. I will leave it at that.
Melanie, thank you very much. Very helpful, very comprehensive overview of the budget situation facing FCPS. Especially appreciate your flagging the JLARC study. There are challenges, to say the least, in Virginia in terms of getting our state to step up. And I know several of you are very familiar, not just with challenges on school funding, but also transportation funding and other issues. So Melanie, thank you very much for providing that complete picture. So now let me just walk through some instructions very quickly on how this process should work. I'm going to ask folks who want to speak to please electronically raise your hand. You should see a little, I know some of you are seeing it because I'm seeing electronic hands go up, but press the raise button on your screen, and it's going to provide a sequence of folks by number, and I'm just going to go right through the numbers. Please state your comment or ask your question, and we'll hopefully give everybody a chance to provide input. And before we open it up, or I open it up, I do want to just thank everybody for being here tonight, providing your input. And I know we'll hear different points of views and different suggestions and different questions, but that's what a town hall is all about. And Phil, some of these questions may be such that I'm going to ask you to help fill in any of the gaps, but with that, let's just go ahead and get started. Norm, I think you are number one on the hands list. So go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment.
Okay, and of course, me being me, I really have more than one question, but I'm only going to ask one right now. So I got to pick which one to ask. And yeah, I have an advantage, I guess, being a county employee. I'm used to doing meetings and teams. So the question I'm going to ask, I guess, thank you both, Melanie and Walter, for your public service. I really appreciate it. You guys are so good at communicating, and I appreciate that every single day. The question I want to ask is one I've actually asked at other town halls in other districts. I am a proud Hunter Mill resident, but that doesn't mean I don't show up at other ones. And so last Friday, I actually followed up a question to the county executive that I had already raised once in Walkinshaw's. All right, get to the point, Norm. The SAC program. We could get more revenue out of SAC if we could expand the program. And I think there's a misconception because the SAC staff are being told that actually it's not a question of how much facilities there are at FCPS schools. It really is a question of staffing right now. And, you know, if we could cut down the wait list, if we could expand SAC registration, that would actually give us more revenue with which we could meet operations, including some pay adjustments. The benchmark studies for SAC teachers are well past 3 years old. We've been waiting to get some information about that, and Supervisor Palchuk is working on that, as I understand it. So I just want to raise that as a concern that I have raised before. And I think it might be good to make sure that all the supervisors and maybe double check on the school side, Melanie and Emma. You know, if the reality may really be complicated. Maybe it's both. Some schools have no physical expansion for the SAC program. Others, it may be about staff. So I've been raising this for 4 years, and you probably know, and I'm going to continue to raise it because it's a way of getting more revenue. And it's a very important program for us all to have. So I will send the other questions I have by written there for the county. So thank you very much. Oh, thank you for that explanation, Melanie. I forgot to do that. Thank you. Thank you.
You know, our Alphabet City. I just would like to say thank you, Norm. And, you know, Supervisor, SAC is often a conversation that many working families have. And I know there is a memorandum of understanding that is in need of updating. And I'm really eager to help with that process. So I hope we can work on that soon.
Fantastic. Norm, thank you for your question and embedded comment in that question, I think. And Melanie, thank you very much for that clarification. Yes, I look forward to that and completely agree. We need to get that updated. Phil, anything you want to add there from the county side?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Norm. Number 2 I see is Bruce Wright. Bruce, go right ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear, Bruce.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I want to start with a comment about the budget. No, actually, before that, I want to thank Melanie for including the funding for the Safe Routes to School program. If I'm not mistaken, that is in the budget. So thank you for that. In looking at the budget, Fund 410 on page 468 shows that most of those items are zeroed out and compared to funding from last year. And I've been told that funds were switched from those accounts to a couple of major accounts, but it's very confusing for us in trying to look at the budget because there's many pedestrian bicycle facility items in that table and I have no idea how much money is going towards those. So I think, and there was no explanation that I could find of what has happened to those funds. And so I've had to ask both your staff, Walter, and the active transportation folks about what happened to those funds and got kind of an answer, but it wasn't a great answer. So just a comment, maybe some explanation of that needs to be included in the budget. A recommendation. During the Board of Supervisor meetings on the bicycle legislation, there were many concerns expressed about pedestrian safety. And so far this year, DMV lists 5 pedestrian deaths in our county, and we're in March. However, the Safe Routes to School or the Safe Streets for All program that was approved 2 years ago shouldn't really be considered a program because I don't think there's any funding for it. And that includes recommendations for an oversight task force for pedestrian signals and signage, maintenance of high priority facilities, pilot projects, many other recommendations. And those are just in the staff and funding recommendations. There's also planning and policy, street design, and so on. So I have 2 questions. One is there any money in the budget for the Safe Streets for All program? And do you know the status of the 16, I think it's a 16 million grant application that was mentioned in the budget? And a follow-up, where is the money going to come from for this if it's not in the budget? Well, we could maybe try cutting back some of our highway expansion or roadway expansion projects that account for in the Visualize 2050 program, $8 billion in transportation projects. And our travel patterns have changed since COVID. There's a lot more work from home, and people are choosing other options for traveling. So back to my other questions about the Safe Route or the Safe Streets for All funding, whether it's included, and the status of that $16 million grant application.
Okay, and actually, I think, Bruce, you had another question there about on page 468, Fund 410. If I could ask Phil, if you could address that one first.
Yeah, so Fund 410 is one of our transportation funds. It's one that is doing a lot of the improvements to infrastructure, a lot of capital projects. What we see with those funds is those capital projects, they take multiple years to complete.
Mm-hmm.
It does look a bit odd in the budget in that you'll see, yes, all those projects with $0 in the FY 2025 advertised. If you look back at last year's budget, when we had the 24 adopted budget, you would see all zeros in the 24 line.
Mm.
You now see big numbers in the 24 revised column. Next year, when we're in 25, after we start going with it, you're going to see big numbers in the 25 column. So what really happens here with these capital projects is that we have this essentially a pot of money to try to complete a project. It's going to take multiple years to spend down that pot of money. And so that pot of money comes into 1 year, we spend what we do out of it, and the rest of it falls to balance. And then when we get into 25, one of the first things we do when we start the fiscal year is revise the budget. Right after Supervisor Alcorn and the rest of the supervisors adopt this budget, we immediately turn around and revise it because we have to figure out those funds that fell out at the end of the year. What are we going to do with them? Part of that process is for these capital projects, making sure we take that money that fell out, that was not spent yet, and we bring it into the new year so it's available to spend next year. So that's really what you're seeing there is just the flow through of those capital balances. I know it gets a little bit confusing with there, but that is what's happening.
So what's the time frame on when those numbers might be put in there? Shortly after the start of the fiscal year?
So our carryover review, my office works on it during the course of July, right after this fiscal year ends. We work on that in July. We turn out our recommendations to the Board of Supervisors at their last meeting in July. I forget the date on that this time, but I think it's right around, it's usually in the last week of July. The board then acts on that usually in September, sometimes October, depending on how the board calendar falls. So that'll be end of July, we will have the documents out on our website, the carryover review documents. It won't be in the advertised or adopted budget at that point, but our carryover review documents will show all those numbers. Next year, when we get around to the 26 advertised budget, you'll see those numbers in the 25 revised column.
Okay,
So,
thank you for that explanation.
Sorry for everybody that's getting a little bit into the weeds in the discussion here. I know the other thing that talking about carryover, one of the things that the board has put forward as one of their priorities is active transportation funding. I'm sorry, Supervisor Alcorn, if I'm stealing some talking points.
Go right ahead. That's what I was going to say. Keep going.
Okay, so the board has committed to a goal of $100 million over a 6-year period dedicated to active transportation. At this point, so the board has been dedicating year-end balances towards that. And since significant balances, and I believe at this point, our policy is 20% of year-end balances going towards that until we get to that 100 million goal. At this point, we're a bit over halfway there. It's like 54 million is in my head as to what's already been dedicated towards that. And so really making some good progress towards having a funding source for some of those bicycle and pedestrian improvements.
Yeah, and we do certainly appreciate that.
No, thank you. And Bruce, you also asked about the $16 million grant application. Which grant application is that?
It's for the Safe Streets for All program, and it was mentioned in the budget.
Okay. Phil, do you have an update on that? I don't think we know. It's still pending, I believe.
Yeah, I don't at this point. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
Bruce, we can follow up on that afterwards and get you that information.
All right. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
Next. Melanie, do you want to jump in, please?
Thank you, Supervisor. Just one point. Thank you, Bruce. And I do think that our 100 mil contingency here really stands out in advocacy and trying to make things better. And I know that the advocacy that you and others provide is great. I do have to say, I know some people are on the call regarding crossing guards, and I certainly do not agree with removing crossing guards in Vienna. I will leave it to the supervisor to state, I know he agrees. But, our schools have been trying to do things like include safely crossing schools education as part of their physical education. We've got
Yeah.
bike programs at Cunningham Park, Marshall Road, Lake Ann Elementary. But really what I find myself and the supervisor often lamenting is VDOT is very slow with things, and it's kind of a quagmire. So we've got to figure out a way to get VDOT to move much more quickly to fix these needs. We've got some communities that have spent over a decade advocating for needs, and
Yeah.
that's just not okay.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a priority with us too. And we've been advocating with them. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you very, very much, Bruce. Thank you, Melanie, for adding that. Yeah, there's a lot going on the pedestrian side. But before I go to the next speaker, Melanie, thank you also for mentioning the school crossing guards. Just to bring everybody up to date who might be waiting on that, I am working on a board matter with Chairman McKay to come to the next board meeting to, first of all, to direct staff to continue providing the crossing guard service in Vienna until any alternatives can be found, but also to ask staff to come back with alternatives for us to review. We're not going to allow any crossing to be unguarded, but we are going to be looking for alternatives that make sense, perhaps in combination with some of the other programs that have been mentioned here tonight. So thank you very much, Melanie, for flagging that too. So let's go to Arthur. Arthur Purvis, welcome. I see your hand up.
Hi there, Supervisor Alcorn. So Mr. Hall complimented you and Mrs. Marin on your communications. I emailed both of you not so recently. You, Supervisor Alcorn, in your comments about the crossing guards, you said there was a shortage of police, and I asked for trend data on police hiring and staffing, and I hope I will hear from you. And Mrs. Marin, I emailed you requesting for an opportunity to meet with you about third grade reading and arithmetic, and I hope I get an answer from you. So I have one comment and one question. My comment for Mrs. Marin is that whenever we raise salaries to keep up with neighboring jurisdictions, the neighboring jurisdictions raise their salaries, and so we get higher taxes but no competitive advantage. My question for Mr. Hagan is, what is the average salary of a county employee, and what will be the average salary of a county employee if this budget goes through?
Yep. And I apologize, I don't have those numbers on my fingertips here.
Supervisor Alcorn, do you know the average salary of a county employee, and do you know what the average salary will be if the budget goes through?
No, I do not. I do know the percentage increase in terms of the proposal in the budget, but I don't know what base that's working on in terms of an average. I don't.
Aren't those important and relevant numbers that you should know right off the top of your head?
Well, perhaps, but that's why we have town halls, Arthur, to figure out what I should know. Anything else, Arthur?
Well, the average salary for a county employee is $90,000. By the way, the school system does publish the average salary of teachers, which is $85,000, going up to $90,000 if the 6% raises go through. But the county, in its 3 volumes of budgets, does not publish county salaries. That is apparently Fairfax County's secret.
All right, Arthur, thank you. I see next hand up is Earl Jones. Welcome, and go ahead and unmute yourself.
I just did. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. I'm a homeowner in the Hunter Mill district, and I've got a question and a comment. One, I will say that we're pretty homeowners, we're pretty much tapped out, just in terms of raising the fees on homeowners. I mean, it's really become an incredible burden. My question is, what percentage of residents in Fairfax County are homeowners, and what percentage are renters, in terms of your housing units?
That's a great question. In terms of somebody else might have the number on renters versus homeowners. I know in terms of the number of single family homes versus apartments and townhomes, it's about 50-50. So about half of our residents live in single-family detached homes, and then the rest live in townhomes and condominiums or apartment buildings. You could probably extrapolate from there. I think we're probably about a 60-65% ownership base, maybe a little bit more than that. Phil, do you happen to know that number off the top of your head?
No, I'm afraid not.
Okay,
I'm
but Earl, we can
looking
get that number for you if you'd like.
Thank you. I would like that.
Okay. Okay. Anything else, Earl?
No, that was it. I mean, I don't know enough of the details to be able to digest everything that's been gone over. I can do that, but I did want to voice that one overarching concern, because this is
Yes.
the increases the last 3 years have been significant.
Yeah, Earl, and I appreciate your comment, that homeowners are tapped out. I completely agree that residential homeowners bear a disproportionate burden of the local tax of our local taxes in Northern Virginia, especially. So we do really go. Unfortunately, we're limited by the number of different taxes we can use and measures that we can use. Certainly, looking at efficiencies, looking at making decisions on programs is one way to reduce the tax burden. Personally, I favor some sort of revenue neutral tax reform that would actually relieve the burden on residential homeowners, which I believe currently is disproportionate. But I hear you, Earl. Thank you.
May I add
Melanie,
something as
please.
well? Thank you. I want to say that the school division is not just looking to increase funding. We are looking at ways to be more efficient always, and I feel more than ever. One thing is how we do our facilities work. And although that funding is not part of this operating budget, but the capital improvement program, which you all vote on as voters, we're looking at ways to be more effective with our contracts, the scheduling, the getting revenue from naming rights. We're looking at retention strategies that actually are budget neutral, different leave policies, and ways to do the professional development in ways that align better with the workforce today. So we're trying to do things to save that funds, but really it's the state. And the question was asked, how come other jurisdictions can raise their salaries? Because their state funding formula for their county is better than ours. For every $1 in state money we send down to Richmond, we get a quarter back. So that's why the burden falls so much on homeowners. If we can get that serious tax reform work done, it can be better. We do not want to raise taxes on our homeowners. We don't. We're trying as best as we can too.
And thank you, Melanie. And Earl, before we go to our next question, it's the internet, so I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like of the 433,000 occupied housing units in Fairfax County, 67% are owner occupied, while 32 or 33% have renters. So yeah, it's about 2/3. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's go. Thank you, Earl, for your question and comment. Let's go to Jill Norcross. Jill.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity and for hosting this online virtual session, because it's very helpful, and I think hopefully will increase participation. And I want to thank Supervisor Alcorn and School Member Marin for all of your work, because I know it is a lot of hard work, and appreciate any opportunity to give feedback. I am a Hunter Mill resident, although my day job I do a lot of advocacy around affordable housing. I think as a resident, I do want to lift up the One Fairfax equity policy, just as being an incredible affirmation of what the direction that the county wants to go and the priorities that the county has. So I guess my request is, as you look at the budgets, that you keep in mind the One Fairfax goals that we had to be equitable in all communities and to provide healthy and safe and sustainable communities, because we know the budget doesn't impact everybody equitably, and where we can make advances, especially in housing and human services and education. I'll just kind of add that. I think more specifically, we need more funding for bricks and mortar housing. As we know, we have a housing shortage. So I was looking for more resources for affordable housing development. We're fortunate that we recently found out we had through the State Department of Behavioral Health and Disability Services that we now will be getting 300 vouchers. That's rent and important wraparound services. But unfortunately, I'm worried that we don't have the units to find for those people to live. So more housing is needed. So through the add-on package and your quarterly reviews, I know the county has done a good job prioritizing housing. So just wanted to elevate that again tonight. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. Yeah, and thank you for mentioning those 300 permanent supportive housing vouchers that came from the state. I'm over the moon about that. I think this is such a wonderful step for the state to step on this. I criticized the state a little while ago, so I got to give them their kudos where deserved in this case. Yes, and it's, I think, going to be a challenge not only to find the units available, although we do have quite a number coming online over the next year or two, which should help with that, but also just the process for getting folks qualified for those permanent supportive housing vouchers, since these do require some findings on an individual basis. There's a lot of work to be done by our community services board and also by our folks in our housing and community development department. But this is, everyone's going to hear a lot about this over the coming couple of years, but it is very hopeful. So thank you very much, Jill. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
So the next, I believe, Monica, I believe you're next. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, I am Monica Nuno. I'm a resident of the town of Vienna. I'm a homeowner. I have 2 kids. One is 8 years old. The other one is 10. They both attend Marshall Road. And my comment is at Marshall Road, 30% of the students do not have the options to ride a bus. A big portion of us, there is not an option to ride the bus because we are close to Marshall Road. So because of that, we have various programs, like one is walking, the other one is a bike train, when we have up to 100 students riding every Tuesday to the school. In average, like every other Tuesday, we have 60 kids at least riding. So for us, the elimination of the cross guards, it's unacceptable. I don't know, it's like we are trying to educate the kids how important it is to be environmentally friendly, how healthy it is to walk, how healthy it is to ride a bike. We even got a new bike to teach all the kindergarteners to, so it's just like completely opposite of the goals in general, of the war. Like, I don't know, so I would like to get an update. I really do not understand how somebody could consider eliminating the crossguard. We only have 2. We could easily request for another one because some of our students live on the other side of Notley. You may don't know, and other students live on the other side of 66. So now we are implementing a new walking program because there is a bridge under 66 and Notley, but we still need the other 2 cross guards that are in the town of Vienna. So any updates?
Yes. Monica, thank you. Here's a brief update. I spoke a little bit to this earlier, but for those of you that are not aware, in December, the Fairfax County Police Department told the town of Vienna police chief that Fairfax County Police and the crossing guards, which are operated under Fairfax County Police Department, would no longer be providing school crossing guard services within the town of Vienna, as well as the town of Herndon and also on Fort Belvoir. I was not aware of this. I was not informed of this. When I found out about it, I immediately contacted the town mayor, Mayor Colbert. Also contacted the chairman of the board, Jeff McKay. And it was immediately or soon told that it was clarified that, well, this is a proposal. So as I mentioned, this is not going forward We are looking at alternatives for providing those services. It may be that it goes back exactly the way it was, and it continues just to be FCPD, police department provided school crossing guards in the town of Vienna. That might be the resolution. It may be that school crossing guards are managed by a different department, by the police department. I'm not sure, but we're not going to leave those crossings unguarded. That is a definite. So the fix or the solution may be Vienna specific, or it may be countywide, and that's something that the chairman and I will be asking staff to look at. But I do appreciate your comments and concerns. And frankly, the visibility that you raise on this issue will help ensure that that no crossing guard vacancies will occur on those properties. So thank you, Monica. Okay. So after Monica, I see Maria. Go ahead and unmute.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Maria. I am a Fairfax County condominium owner for over 30 years now, and I work for Fairfax County Health Department, and May 1st is going to be 20 years. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity of letting us speak and share our concerns with you. As a Fairfax County employee, I would like to share with you that I was born a diabetic, and every year I spend over $15,000 on medical bills that are either my copay, my percentage, or not covered by the insurance. Therefore, with that in mind, I also wanted to share with you that a lot of the individuals that work for the county, they serve our own residents in the most lovely and beautiful way. Please think of us, and we're hoping, and may I ask you to please, in their name and my family's name, if you can please think about fully fund the MRA this year, so my family can afford to continue living in Fairfax County, and my family can afford to pay for my medical bills. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you take this into consideration. Have a beautiful afternoon.
Maria, thank you so much for being here tonight and for providing those thoughts. Thank you. For those of you that might not be aware of what the MRA is, it's the market rate adjustment. It's a number that's calculated every year to estimate the market rate for county employees based on what other local jurisdictions are paying employees. And it's sort of like a COLA, cost of living adjustment, for those of you that are aware of that. But the market rate adjustment in the proposed budget is not fully funded. It is less than that. So Maria, thank you for making that presentation. I appreciate that. Okay, let's go next to Melody.
Hello. I live in Vienna, and as a homeowner in Vienna, I just have a few questions. I'm concerned about, as others, about the burden that's being placed on homeowners in Fairfax County. And after reviewing things, I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding this properly. It looks to me like the budget is proposing that over between 23 and 25, that teachers would get a 20% raise, that non-uniformed employees would get a 17% raise over the course of 3 years, and uniformed employees would get a 21 to 27% raise. And I just want to make sure I'm getting that right, that's because those rates seem, I mean, in an environment where I believe the county is saying that inflation is 2.5%, those seem like pretty high numbers to me. It's kind of unheard of just across the board in the private sector as far as I've ever experienced. So I just want to make sure, did I get that right? And then the other question I have is, Melanie mentioned the increase in children in school with these socioeconomic challenges. And I'm curious, Melanie, if you know why that is, because when I look at what the budget is doing to homeowners and to people who are driving cars, we're looking at, mortgage rates are increasing, the cost of insurance is going way up, property values are increasing, the cost of home ownership has become very prohibitive. It's very difficult for people to own a home. It's becoming more difficult for people to maintain their home. And we're talking about, gas prices are up, car prices are up, used car prices. I mean, I know it's come down a little bit, but, since COVID, that became sort of crazy. And when we're talking about giving 20 to 27% raises over the course of 3 years, because we're needing to also meet the needs of socioeconomic challenges in the schools. I mean, I guess my question is, how do we know we're not just exasperating that problem by doing this to homeowners and raising the taxes on people who are just frankly struggling right now and have been for the last 3 years? That's my question.
Melody, thank you. Melanie, I don't know if you want to do the schools first and then I'll work through the county, or I can go first.
Sure, since that's freshest. Well, thank you, Melody, for the question. Honestly, you answered some of it in the points that you listed. It is hard on a lot of people economically. Fairfax County currently has in its student body between kindergarten to grade 12, 66,000 students who are eligible for that federal food program, which is a proxy for poverty. That is 1/3 of our entire student body of 180,000. Now, for some people who have lived here a long time, I think that's really hard to fathom. That is 6 times filling the Eagle Bank Arena at George Mason University. So when children come with such high needs from lower socioeconomic incomes, from poverty, there's bodies of research that say it is so much harder to educate them. They just need more supports. In addition, whether it's food, it could be clothing, it could be a basic human right and need, or it could be that they've suffered trauma or they haven't had preschool before they enter, which is why we're also trying to add preschool classrooms. Layer on top of that, what if they have a special need or a learning disability, or they're autistic? We're able to identify these students' needs. So many of our employees don't live in Fairfax. I am not familiar with that number of 20% that you mentioned. This budget offers a 6% compensation increase for our staff. So I'm not sure where that number is coming from, but I have not heard of that before.
Okay, Melanie, thank you. And Melody, I know you did also note, I believe, salaries for police officers and for fire and rescue officials. Phil, I might ask to see if those numbers are accurate. I think they're pretty close if they're not right on. Phil?
Yeah, they are. I think certainly when we've looked at employee compensation, if we go back 5 years, when we were into FY 2021, beginning of the pandemic, we held salaries flat that year. The following year, there was a 1% across the board. So we certainly had a couple of years of very either no or very small increases for county employees. Certainly, the past 3 years, that market rate adjustment, the calculation has been high, primarily based on some of the inflation factors we've seen, which get counted into that playing into those increases. But again, I think if we look back a little bit further over the 5-year period, you'll see that the average over those years is a little bit lower as a result of those years where it's held flat. Really, when we look at our employee base, one of the things we've been struggling with has been recruitment and retention, which is why you're seeing some of these increases, particularly in public safety. We continue to have some challenges with particularly police, as well as some of our other uniform professions. And that's certainly why there have been some targeted increases in those areas. Also looking at other things to try to get, especially police officers, hired be able to retain them, because there has been a lot of competition within that field, and then the other side, perhaps a decrease in interest in that field just overall. So we're trying to do what we can to make sure that we are able to get those employees into our system and we keep them.
Yeah, and Phil, let me just add on to that. I mean, this attempt by our police department to have the town of Vienna take care of crossing guards in the town is one of, I think, perhaps a misguided way, but one attempt to deal with the shortage in the police department, not only of crossing guards, but also of police officers who have to back up those crossing guards when they aren't available, and when there's nobody else to guard a crossing. So, we are doing other things besides just salary to try to get our police force up to the levels that it needs to be. We're doing a lot on recruitment, as you mentioned, Phil, particularly with the academy, and trying to pull in new folks and make the job there as attractive as it can be. And I'll just mention on another service in our fire and rescue department, paramedics have been a real challenge for us, and we have prided ourselves in Fairfax County really at being probably the best in the country in terms of our fire and rescue and paramedic response. We're struggling to keep that up, but we're not alone. It's not just in Fairfax County. It's all over, but there just aren't as many people wanting to be paramedics as there were, 20, 30 years ago. So this is one attempt to try to do that, but it is a balancing act. It's a balancing act in terms of what taxes are necessary to fund that. So anyway, thank you very much for your question, Melody. Let's keep going, and I see Sean, your hand's up. Go right ahead, Sean.
Yeah, one comment. I had sent to you, Supervisor Alcorn, email back on March 13th, so I have a whole bunch of questions. But really, in looking at what the county executive's done in the budget, it appears to me that there is a focus on retaining employees. Has the county spent time looking at what they can do to outsource services for a much more efficient and effective way? And what that does is it allows more flexibility in being able to adjust. And also, has the schools done the same thing, in both cases?
I guess the short answer, Sean, is yes, at least in selected areas. I mean, one of the things, let's see what comes back in terms of the school crossing guards. If that might be something, that could be outsourced. I don't know if that's going to be a fit for that, or if that's even going to be recommended by the police department, given the training requirements for that. But that might be, an example of that. We do actually have we do have significant services right now that are outsourced. For example, our connector bus system is staffed by contract employees. And I'll be honest, Sean, this is one I'm not that excited about contracting out. We seem to be moving more in that direction on solid waste. We don't have that many county operated routes in Hunter Mill District. So I'm not really driving that train.
Right.
But yes, and Sean, keep going. And I have all 7 of your questions, but if you want to ask another one or two, go ahead.
Yeah, with respect to the schools, have they done the same thing?
Please.
Yes. So, our superintendent, Dr. Michelle Reed, she's been here for 1.5 years, and she came from Seattle just on the heels of earning the National Superintendent of the Year designation. And so she's 1.5 years in, and I've seen her put really fantastic systems into place and invest in the things we need, such as our HR, human resources. What I'm seeing, we ask even just academically, getting our reading to use the best curriculum. So there are some things that we contract out for, but really it's our people that make education, work. And I'm totally blanking. There was a really great point I wanted to make. The board does review our contracts, but I'll have to think on it. It was right at the tip of my tongue, Sean. I will claim it again just in a moment.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. To me, I mean, I spent time as a chief financial officer for a public company, and believe me, we spent a lot of money with employees, but we recognize that that is a forever cost. And
Yeah.
going to outsourcing allowed us the flexibility. And nobody wants to lay people off, but when you have a contract, it becomes much easier. Anyway, that's just a comment.
Well, thank you. And I did just remember our HR department is going through a cyclical review now of all of our positions, by title, so that we are ensuring that they are focused on the work at hand. Do they need to be sunset? But again, you can't contract out that relationship of a teacher and a student. So,
well, no, that I understand, but right. You have a $3.8 billion budget, and I've heard from people in my, group that, well, there's efficiencies in $3.8 billion. There just has to be. And one other question,
please.
And this is the rest you can deal with. Has the county looked at its span of control for its administrative employees? Administrative employees are the most expensive and certainly the most. And have you benchmarked and looked at both private and other governmental institutions that span of control is the maximum that it could be? And is it given the flexibility to those employees who actually operate in like tax administration, human resources? I mean, if you have one supervisor for one employee, that makes no sense. But maybe if you have one supervisor for 15 employees, those 15 exercise their judgment and skill. Anyway, has that been done?
Sean, that's a great question. There was a process a few years before I got on the board to look at every business process. Phil, you may have been involved in that, but I'll ask you to address that. But Sean, it's a great question. I mean, I'm a fan of flat organizational structures that empower employees on the front lines. But Phil, can you address the question there?
Yeah, I mean, so we do have a workforce analysis function that goes on, workforce planning within HR. I wouldn't say that we've done a holistic, like, let's go down and look at every agency as part of this one review, but that is something that our Department of Human Resources is looking at with agencies as they're kind of working through what they need to do with their workforce, what they need to change with their workforce. I do it overall within the county. I mean, I would say that where we have supervisors, where we have managers, they're always working supervisors in that, typically what we'll see is that they're carrying some amount of workload themselves. It's not that they're, supervising the facility, the assembly line. They are in there doing a lot of things themselves. And so I think there's that aspect too, where we have those staff.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Well, one thing I'd like to add is, when I think of custodial staff, I mean, even our custodial staff, like, they interact with our children. So it is more limited what we can contract out because those are positions of trust. Now, I will say there's even things like background checks. The state puts it on the school divisions to handle all background checks. And there's a super program run by the FBI now that would cost the school division about $600,000 per year if we wanted to have the best system. And it's completely opt-in, but it only works if all the jurisdictions are in. So these are the kinds of costs that we have to end up being burdened on when really positions of confidence could be funded from elsewhere. But I just want to say real quickly, Sean, we have positions on our audit committee, our school board audit committee for residents, to serve, or we also have our human resources advisory committee. So, I mean, your expertise seems really great, and I'd be happy to be in touch about those future opportunities. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Supervisor Alcorn and Melanie, thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate mine are probably a little more detailed, but it's always helpful to have you be able to respond. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sean. And I would just, that's one of the dangers of getting involved and asking good questions, Sean. You might you might get volunteered. So
very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rob, go right ahead. Mr. Whitfield. And unmute yourself if you see the button there. And
Am I unmuted? Yes, I am.
there you go. We hear you, Rob.
And I'm sorry, I don't know why my picture is showing up on the right rather than the main box of people. So I don't know what I did wrong. Thank you, Supervisor Alcorn, Phil Hagan, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name of the school board lady. I've gone to budget meetings for about a decade. And so Walter knows that I asked lots of questions, so forgive me for that. But let me start off with a simple one for the school crossing situation. I thought in the old days, it used to be mainly elderly people who staffed the school crossings. Does that no longer happen for some reason?
Yeah, the school crossing guards are trained and certified by the police department. I think they maybe run the gamut on ages, but they tend to be folks that are able to work for an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. So that probably skews a little towards the retired set.
My recollection from 60 years ago was my school crossing guard was certainly in her 60s or 70s. But as to the overall school situation, I had asked a couple of questions as to the compensation of the senior officials in the Fairfax County Public Schools. And I mentioned to you, Matt, what's his name? Mateo Dunn from Mount Vernon District. He's supposed to be getting updated data on the compensation. Have we seen anything on that? But more importantly, is the decline in SAT scores. And has any progress been made on SAT? And finally, on schools, the last one is the estimate I had was 22,000 children are being taught in trailers. And I was told last week, well, it's very difficult to build schools. And I actually gave Walter a suggestion this afternoon. I don't know if you read that, Walter, that I suggested several years ago, but Dulles Airport has around 10,000 acres, including at the bottom portion, let's say near the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Fairfax County. And 10 years ago, they were talking about a need for a Western high school in Fairfax County. And so has any consideration being given to talking to MWA about such a school? It could be an aviation, oriented high school.
Shall I go ahead, Walter?
Yeah, please, Melanie.
Well, yes, let me refresh. So your most recent question was about building schools. Yes, it is difficult to build schools. It's difficult to build a lot of things these days post-COVID, given backlog in materials, inflation, and lack of staff. I also mentioned earlier, we are looking at how we plan for our facility renovations. I find it unacceptable that our current renovation list takes 40 years to go through. And as to that, I passed a motion when we approved the CIP back in February, asking the superintendent to come back with us with alternate ways to build our buildings and renovations that would be quicker and less expensive. I think, again, our new superintendent brings a lot of new information and knowledge post-COVID, and I'm eager for her to put it in motion. Regarding piloting in a program, one of our school board members, my colleague Kyle McDaniel, is actually a commercial airline pilot. And
sorry, who is that?
Kyle McDaniel.
Oh, yes, he is a pilot. Yes, I knew that.
He is at large, but even if he wasn't, this superintendent has already mentioned piloting education because we are right near Dulles and also National. There's a lot going on to get more in our career development and career tech programs. The other piece you mentioned, can you remind me your second point, please?
SAT scores?
Yes. So we actually just approved the contract for SAT delivery and programs from the College Board. And there was great discussion about how the College Board is a monopoly. It was a sole source contract because nobody else provides what the College Board does. And so amidst this, there are lots of conversations and changes at colleges as to whether they are even requiring the SATs. So we prepare our students for the Virginia standards of learning and actually even above and beyond that. So that is our goalpost, and our SAT rates, I know they remain high, but our goal right now is making sure all of our kids read on grade level at grade 3, that they are on track to take 8th grade algebra, if they are, have the ability to, and that they graduate with a pathway to 4-year college, 2-year credential, or what else. There's a lot that leads up to that SAT data point, and a lot that we don't control in that SAT data point.
And as to the compensation of senior school officials, I know Mr. Dunn asked that question over a month ago. Are you aware of any response forthcoming from headquarters?
You'd have to ask him about that. I know that budget season is very busy and people ask our budget staff a lot of questions and they're going as fast as they can. But I think our principals are worth every single penny because they do the work of making sure our schools, are functional and running.
I'm not talking about school principals in the schools. I'm talking about the staff in the administration and Merrifield.
I could tell you, like, a CFO in the private sector could make double, if not triple, what a CFO in the public sector, would make in a government position. It's very hard to attract HR professionals, legal, CFO, when they could go to the private sector and make that money easily. So all of these things lead to this HR retention and recruitment strategy. So I'll certainly see the response that's given to Mr. Dunn, but I see these people working and I see what they're trying to do in this climate, and we have to invest in our people.
Yeah, Rob, let me just jump in on that. And Paul in my office can look out for that as well to see if that's coming back or if that's come back yet, and let you know. Rob, I do want to just give one shout out, and Melanie, you didn't mention this because it's probably the toughest thing you do on the toughest elected body that we have in our system, which is yes, it's the boundary policy. And thank you for looking at that. I know anytime changing boundaries is discussed, it is a third rail. It is extremely difficult to do, but thank you for doing that, because we do, Rob, as you know, we do have some schools over capacity, under capacity, and looking at the boundaries is really important.
And I was told last week that the problem at Kent Gardens had in fact been solved by changing the boundaries. Is that correct? In McLean. So
I don't have that off the top of my head, but what we're trying to do is look at it whole county-wide. So right now the board is looking at the policy that the superintendent will use.
How often do you review the boundaries? Every 3 years?
Listen to this.
The policy is supposed to be, all of our school board policies are supposed to be reviewed every 5 years. Okay, I'm starting my 5th year on the board. When I got on, it was COVID. So I'm a public policy professional. I have my master's in policy. Right now, we are doing the work of the school division. We are reviewing our boundary policy. It has not been looked at for review in 11 years. And a comprehensive boundary work has not been done in, I'm told, 30 years.
Oh, wow.
So it's going to be a lot, but the practice that we are given all these recommendations on is to then do a little bit at a time. And we won't have trailers as much. We won't have kids passing by 3 schools before we get there. We won't have kids, sitting on buses for too long. But all of these things, that is the work of the board, is the policy work, and the superintendent works to figure it out. She's probably going to use our great GIS data from our county office and population data. But that is how we get rid of trailers and a lot of other things. And we uphold One Fairfax and really a lot of things.
So Phil, this is my 3rd time meeting you. Thank you for.
Thank you, Mel.
I appreciate how hard it is. And I knew, Len Wales and Joe Mondoro, maybe others. The question is, I'm very concerned, and it's maybe not a budget question so much as is how we run effectively. I sent an email at 6:30 tonight because I saw that the Planning Commission was supposed to have a transportation meeting, but a lot of these bodies are not being as effective in their public outreach. Maybe this is for Walter rather than for Phil. But I mean, you've known me long enough, Walter, that I don't raise these things lightly. And so, you know, the whole business of well, for instance, Envision 2050 was mentioned before, and the county is supposed to update its whatever it's called, transportation priority planning process. And when I asked your colleague last week, he said his next meeting is June the 18th. And I said, but you're supposed to come up with the new transportation priorities plan. And I know you've just handed the reins over to him recently, so maybe it's not fair to ask you, but what do you see that we can do to, I mean, I don't know how many people are here tonight. Is it 12, 15, 20? We're not reaching the public. I mean, I go to things like the Commonwealth Transportation Board meetings. I have to watch online sometimes. Very frequently, there are no questions at all. No public participants. And so we seem to have somewhat of a crisis of public participation in our decision-making process.
Yeah, Rob, let me just jump in real quick. I know this is a budget town hall, but very quickly on the transportation processes, you're correct. Our transportation priorities plan was supposed to be coming to us this spring. It's going to slip a little bit into June, which I don't think it's spring. It feels more like summer to me. But that is coming up because we have not updated that since I've been on the board. It was done back in 2019. What's the last time it was finalized? So I do look forward to that process. And actually, specific to Hunter Mill District, I've been having discussions with several folks associated with various Hunter Mill committees to try to figure out how we could increase and improve public participation in the Hunter Mill Transportation Advisory Committee, as well as we have Transportation Service District Advisory Boards, both for Reston and for Tysons. So, Rob, I hear you, and I agree there needs to be improvement in terms of the communication.
I just remember my question for Phil Hagan.
So all right, go ahead. And then we'll move on. Go ahead.
180 million bond issue for Metro this fall, and another one in 2 years from now. Do you know the purpose of the funding of what the use of the funds is intended for?
I mean, those bonds are to support the Metro capital infrastructure.
So they're capital. So in other words, is that Fairfax County share, let's say, towards the 8,000 series cars? But I don't need an answer tonight, but I would like, before the budget public hearings, I want to know, where's the money going to be used? Is it being just spent in Fairfax County? And equally important, we have not had a highway bond issue. I think it was 2008 that the last major bond issue, there was maybe 20 million set aside in 2015 for highways, but it's over 10 years or 15 years now since we had a significant highway bond issue in Fairfax County. Any plan of action to address that?
So on the highway bonds, that original bond, it's taken a long time to spend down those funds. So actually, that's one of the things that we're looking at within the CIP is either pushing out or pulling off the next roads bond from our CIP, and really looking at alternative ways to finance that without locking into our GEO program. Certainly within our GEO program, as I alluded to earlier, we're hitting some capacity constraints there as far as getting to all of the capital projects that we need to get to, whether it be rec centers, police stations, fire stations. And so we're really looking to free up capacity where we can, just as we see really the cost of construction increasing across the board as we go out for those various projects.
So thank you, Phil, for that. Rob, we run over a little bit. I know we had planned this to go till 8:30, but I want to thank everybody for being on the line and participating, and excellent questions. Obviously, different points of view. I'm really appreciative of of staff. Phil, thank you so much for your great presentation. And Melanie, thank you. Very helpful information that you provided as well. Melanie, you have any last comments you want to make?
There's so much that's part of this, and so much of it is at our hands in terms of revenue, but it's a lot, and I'm really grateful for the input, and I'm happy to follow up with anyone. So yes, and Mr. Purves, I did get your email. I have it in my queue, so thank you.
And likewise, I responded to Arthur during the call. So thank you, Arthur. And if folks have other questions, Sean, I know you've sent some already, so be happy to get back with you on those. And if you have things, please don't hesitate to send questions, comments to the Hunter Mill mailbox. It's huntermill@fairfaxcounty.gov. And I know several of you know that email well, which is absolutely fantastic. And happy to look at all of your comments. Thank you all. Thank you for saying thank you, Arthur. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you all.